think that was my fault, actually. Okay, coming out of recess at 8:06. And Pam, you're up.
Water, sewer, and solid waste budgets. As I was saying, these are a little bit more detailed in the attached preliminary budget because this has a slightly different timeline. The utility bills go out the end of February, so we need to go first and second and third reading and adoption before that time to adopt the rates. So the main purpose of this report is to basically, we have another meeting that we can look at this as well before we have to start the first, second, and third reading on February 6th. And it is the water, sewer, and solid waste budget. It does include all capital requests and all supplemental requests, unlike the following preliminary budget. So what I did was I was able to do these budgets with a 0% increase for sewer, solid waste, and water. So I thought if we started with the water budget, I'm not saying that I necessarily think it should be 0%. You can see if you go to the second page of the report, page 21 of 100, that I'm actually forecasting a water surplus. But I think this is a good year with a 0% increase. But I think this is a good year to have the surplus because we have the huge unknown of what the tendered cost of the water tanks is going to be. So this would give us an extra to cover off if the cost did come in higher than anticipated. As well, if it didn't, we could use it for other projects or it could flow through to reserves because we do know when we do our asset management plan that we'll probably find that we do have to start increasing our reserves. So this was actually a good thing. When we went through, we realized that we were still going to have a surplus, and that was with a 0%. So council does have the option of still having an increase in the water rates. Every 1% increase would provide about $8,300 in revenue if you actually would like the surplus to be even higher. And we won't have the results of the tender, will we, now, before we actually have to adopt the budget. So, but I was actually, the Public Works Manager and myself were pleased when we did this budget and realized we were going to have a surplus because we think this is the year. It gives us a bit of a cushion as we're going into a huge multi-million-dollar project. To have a bit of a cushion if
right, so this is for user rates. That covers operating costs.
Yes, and
plus
capital. And the other thing I have in here is
and capital?
Yes, that's what I'm saying is that there's no additional capital that.
But that's not covered by rates anyway. That is a tax matter, is it not?
No, it's covered by rates. The water capital is covered by the utility rates, the water utility rates. So I have rebudgeted, obviously, the unspent portion of the grant and the loan revenue and rebudgeted the costs of the tank, with the exception of what we've incurred this year, which has been mainly for AECOM.
I forgot that it was loan funded.
So anyway, I just, that was sort of my overview, so I just thought, any questions about the budget?
Well, I do have a question.
Sure.
If this is a utility-based bill for water and we're doing a water project, would it be a hard pill to swallow to ask for a bit more money this year?
I don't think so. We, if you feel it necessary, we've never had a 0% increase. I'm actually not a huge fan of 0% increases because it's implying that
the visibility
we have
would be
money.
there, trucks would be moving in and out, people would be no works happening, so I think they'd be, I don't know.
Yeah. Like I said, I put the 0% in. I just felt it was easier to build up with the revenue rather than putting an arbitrary amount in and having to take it away if you didn't want that high rate.
Given the amount of work that we're undertaking, Norm's point is relevant in that I think that if it's not going to create a storm of, people saying, well, why have we got a surplus? And the history in Lions Bay indicates that water's always been, for the most part, it's been a big problem, and we're starting to bring it to terms. We're coming to terms. There's nothing wrong with adding to that surplus if we possibly can in a reasonable manner. I think that's a good point. It really is.
We don't have to decide that today. It was just, like I say, this is a first draft. Council, you can if you want to, but we do have one other meeting, the next meeting in 2 weeks where we'll be discussing this as well. It gives you a chance. It's a lot of information to take away, absorb, come back with more questions.
Yeah, my only concern is because this presupposes that the secondary suite fee remains. Is that the decision that council made?
Yes, for this year. It was going to remain.
I'm asking council.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We were going to kick the secondary suite can down the road.
Right.
Yeah.
It's in the minutes.
Well, what's in the minutes is that you were going to investigate other things as well, but
No, so
council can certainly re-opine on this one.
it was, sorry, just, it was communication,
Yeah,
that we can assist with trying to get them on board,
I know, I read very carefully.
enforcement, and final thing was amendment of the bylaw itself, but retaining this, the surcharge itself.
Well, no, amendment of the bylaw could include rescinding the fee.
No, that wasn't the direction that was given, it was kick it down the road, we'll see where the communication and the enforcement gets us. That was what.
Okay,
this
I'm
was
offering
about.
council an opportunity to re-opine. Ron, I know you're against the fee.
I'm against the fee,
Sorry, is
but I
this a
think
motion
we
for
agreed to kick it down the road too.
You know, I just want to hear what people say about the budget.
So I thought we agreed to kick it down the road, which by implication was that the budget piece stayed with it.
Okay. Okay. The other grants is an infrastructure planning grant, I take it?
Yes, we actually submitted the application today,
Oh, okay, great.
and it would be for $10,000 for the Bayview road design.
So you're anticipating exactly the same operating costs? Labor, chlorine, all that stuff, and very little added capex that we don't know about? A winch and a truck, something like that?
Our hands are pretty full with the clean water wastewater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so let's just take a sense around the table. We don't have to decide now. I think I know what you're going to say, but I want to hear you say it in terms of an increase or not.
I'm fine as firstly, Pam has done what I asked her to do several months to give council a 0, so we can work from there versus adding. Now, my personal view, I see the increase on the new employee as part of this. That's.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. I
Thank
forgot
you.
to mention that.
Did you want to do that first?
This also includes an additional public works employee. I mean, I know it's in the notes, but I didn't want, I want to be transparent about that, because this is different than the budgets I've done in the past, where I've gone in level base with no additions. Council felt strongly, I felt in the last budget, that they wanted to see that. And this person is allocated between utilities and public works, so 50% of the cost of the new employee is in these utility budgets, so we've managed to absorb that and still be able to show you a 0% with a surplus.
So what extra work is happening within water that needs another half a person?
We have an upcoming CSC where we'll go through it in detail, but there are a number of activities: valve exercising, air valve, blow-off valve maintenance. There's a number of best management practices in water that aren't getting done.
Yeah. Does any of the change include automated sampling?
Automated sampling is a significant cost. I haven't got the full
Capital cost.
capital
Huge
costs.
operating savings.
To a certain degree. There are still samples that will always be required. For example, you can't automate fecal coliform tests,
Yeah.
right? So there's always going to be grab sampling that happens.
But monthly rather than daily.
The only there's I believe 1 or 2 municipalities, Metro and the City of Vancouver, have some automated stations. They incorporate that into their existing SCADA, and that's simply for chlorine residual and some of the
turbidity.
standard. But they still have to take samples, so there's still people going out there.
Yeah. Okay.
So to conclude, Mayor Burrow, from my perspective, I see that staff have chopped where they can meaningfully. The major piece is the addition of the employee. To Norm's point, I mean, round numbers, there's $120,000 surplus, which is pretty meaningful. And I don't see the cosmetics of doing a 3% tax increase to achieve another $24,000. So to me, the 0 market's a lot better than 3.
Yeah, I would be inclined to agree with that. Seeing as we taxed for the project last year, we don't get to tax for it again this year because all we've done is delay it more or less.
Well, you're just throwing more dough in the till, I get that.
Yeah.
But I mean,
But as you say, 120 is fine, and there are political reasons to keep things flat if we're not doing anything new,
well,
other than half a person.
staff's gonna bring back their CapEx and other stuff here too, so I mean, who knows?
Well, but the capex here is quite quite small.
Yeah.
A new
But-
capex.
But, so this is just their first kick at it, which to me, my thumbprint is on it.
Fred?
As I look over the thing, the overview, I think it looks great. There's a few little queries on the nuts and bolts and dollars and cents and stuff that I might have. You know, for example, I don't know why the insurance fluctuates so much, yet the amortization is the same as last year. It's no big deal. The end result is the end result, and I like the end result. How you got there is curious at times.
Yeah, that number may come down a little bit. At this point, I'll know, before we finalize the budget, I will know what the insurance is. The rates do go up every year, and sometimes the value of, not so much in water, but the value of what we insure goes up, and we have new assets that we have to insure. For example, there'll be a big hit when we, the new value of the water tanks, we don't have to insure them yet. So that was just my guess, but they do tend to go up every year, the insurance.
Let them.
And the amortization is just notional.
Oh,
I think
thank
we
you for
just-
pointing that out. The amortization, I won't, I just budgeted the same as last year. I don't have the actuals yet because in January I'll be working on the year end. I'll know what the actual amortization is. And then we will have to incorporate the amortization. But again, it's in and out. We add it back in terms, because it's a non-cash item that we don't tax for, but the argument is you should start taxing for it to build up your reserves.
We've gone through
Yeah,
this. We need,
right.
we have to know. Okay. So I think you've got nods all round, right, Norm?
Yeah.
Although you said that.
Yeah, I just thought if we're doing a big project, and it's nice to build a bit of contingency, but if it's only going to be $25,000, you know.
For the cosmetics of not having an increase,
sure.
why? Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks. So we'll move on to the sewer budget.
Okay, the sewer budget, again, I have 0% in here. You'll notice when we get to the bottom, we do have a bit of a deficit, 3,200, but I am anticipating having a surplus in 2017, not of 18,000, because the year-to-date actual, this was actual as of November, so we do have more costs to come in. But we, like I say, we will have a surplus, so we could do 0% and essentially do like an income smoothing or a rate stabilization. We have a surplus in 2017, so it can cover the deficit in 2018.
We budgeted a
So-
$12,000 surplus, and we're going to end up with something like that.
Yes.
Mhm.
And like I said, well, there'll be more costs coming through, but it'll be close to budget, but we did actually budget the surplus, so.
And I seem to recall we had an excessive reserve
We
for
do,
sewer.
that's a good point. I track kind of the surplus related to each fund, and the sewer surplus is the largest, so we do have a fairly good, over $100,000 surplus, accumulated surplus in sewer. So, again, sewer's fairly straightforward. I'm not sure if there's any questions, but I think staff would recommend actually a 0% increase for this, even though we do have the deficit, because it won't, over a 2-year period, won't draw anything from the surplus, because the 2017 surplus will offset the 2018 budgeted deficit.
You don't need to be putting any reserves in play for future development opportunities in terms of planning, even for starters planning, let alone CapEx.
Planning for a wider network for the sewer?
Well, I'm thinking more increased capacity or failover or modularization or anything. It may not even be happening in 2018.
Yeah, I think we need to look at long-term strategy for sewer, if that's what, the biggest thing we have right now is the 2 developments in Calvin Grove.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah.
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 And they'll be driving it and paying for most of it.
Right, so yes, in theory. So
If those things proceed.
if they're still very mooted and
Preliminary.
as yet unapproved, and would require a rezoning exercise, which is a public hearing. So I don't think anybody would advocate a decrease,
No.
given our excessive reserves. And I say excessive mindfully because it's a small operating cost, and just because of reasons we over-collected.
Again, on this one, we haven't done the rounds yet. I'm fine with my thin print on this one, and I look forward to seeing the outflow video on the website, sure. Wow.
It's good stuff if you like that kind of stuff.
You have to know where to look,
It all flows downhill,
or not.
or not, yeah.
It's good, clean water. Come on.
Maybe we
So-
can do some advertising there with a realtor sign.
So on the other side of all this stuff, we fully recognize that we have to take significant steps in sewage in the village, okay, because of the septic problems that we have and things like that. And so I see every penny that we're able to put in place, that we don't have, as we go along, the less the less significant the impact's gonna be in the end when we finally have to start making changes. So the more money there is in the pot, the better off. And I'm not saying this to turn it into a big cash grab, I'm saying that we need to think down the road. So we've got development happening in Calvin Grove, which is gonna help cushion the
Potential.
blow for the just increases that have to be done there, but we already have a system in place there that needs to be enhanced to allow for new development. But along Lions Bay Avenue, where the beach park is, and stuff like that, where we don't take anything, and it's all on a septic system, we have to be aware of the fact that we're gonna have to make some changes fairly soon with that stuff. So we need to, every time we look at this stuff, we gotta think, okay, sewage, down the road, we're gonna have to come up with some money, and we're gonna have to start seeding this thing. And so the more we do it, the less impact it's gonna be. So my view is, we need to think about that.
Okay, so that's, Ron, you've opined. Fred, just give a sense to staff where you stand on the proposal.
I'm fine.
This report's only being presented for information purposes at this stage, but you don't anticipate any major... Well,
I'm happy with that.
yeah, I'm happy with it, so that's fine. So that gives you an indication of where you stand there. It looks like not too much more work to be done. So I'll take a motion to receive the...
One more, solid waste.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Beg your pardon.
It's easy to miss, it's very small. Solid waste, again, we can keep, I was surprised at this, we really just have to cover our waste control costs, our contract, plus just some overhead. And we're able to keep the rates the same, which I wasn't anticipating because there has been a really big increase in the tipping fees for organics in 2018 to the tune of $670 a month. And anticipating that the recycling will go up 5%. But I had to remind myself of this. In 2017, we had 3 months under our old contract with higher charges that I had to budget for, and then 9 months of waste control with the lower fees. And 2018 is all waste control. So those savings actually offset the increase in the tipping fees. So 0% is actually what we can do, because there's really no purpose of having a surplus in solid waste because we don't have any assets. It's essentially just we're passing on the costs of the contracted service plus a little bit of overhead, which we try to keep to a minimum. And we have no staff assigned to this either, so there's no staff time in here. So
Do you anticipate any issues with recyclables now that China has closed the gates on recycle destinations?
I haven't heard anything coming down the pipe for recycling yet. The only thing, like Pam mentioned, was the organics,
Yeah.
and that's primarily because of the closure of the Harvest Energy plant in
Yeah.
Richmond.
Yeah.
But on the note, that was why the 5% increase. It was exactly
Oh,
because
to
of China.
accommodate
They get
that.
nothing for paper now. They used to get revenue for paper, and it's actually costing them extra to get rid of some of the recyclables. So I see that as a continuing cost escalation. But
Well,
the
I
estimate
hear
for
that
2018 is
Vancouver and
5%.
Burnaby are stockpiling recyclables. They've got no recycling. They're just putting them in a big pile, and they'll go to landfill eventually. Yeah, that's what happens to wealthy navel-gazing communities. In the end, you just have to put it all in the landfill. Okay, but you've accommodated that, so that's
Yeah,
that's
we
good.
have. Like I
That's
say, it was
good.
a nice surprise. So
Yeah, so the collection contract is simply because of the 3 months that we didn't have to pay. 3 expensive months.
right.
Okay,
We've
good.
also had a little bit extra in the budget last year, just with switching and not knowing exactly what we were going to pay. We were sort of estimating some of the costs because the new contract didn't start until March.
One question I have though,
Sure.
Pam, you mentioned there's no staff time involved, but there's certainly your time, I don't see factored in here.
Oh, yes, actually, that's a good point. I misspoke. We don't have an actual staff member, like salaries in here that we charge here, but we do have the internal allocations of 9,500.
Okay.
So that's exactly what that is. It's the overhead time that it's charged to the general fund that we charge to water, sewer, and solid waste. So this would be the share, and that's what we recover through our rates. So the bulk of the charge is for the waste control costs, but we do have a little bit of overhead that we allocate to the rates as well to recover.
Okay, thanks. Now I'll ask for a motion to receive the report for information purposes. Thanks, in a second. That happen? All in favor? Opposed, that carries?
And Mayor, just because we are trying to expedite a variety of budget processes, I think the staff has winged along this pretty quickly, and as quickly as they can bring it to a conclusion, but
Took the words out of my mouth, yeah. I mean, certainly in terms of the utility bill
Yep.
stuff, which is a more timely, time requiring exercise, I think you're there.
Well, one option I can do, if I can speak to this, is we have the first, second, and third readings scheduled for February 6th, but I could bring this to the next meeting, have one more chance at review, and do first reading, so we don't have to do, I mean, usually we try not to do first, second, and third reading of
Yeah.
financial in the same meeting.
Yeah, tend to not like that. That would sort of be more, better optics. Peter, it's up to you.
Yeah, do first
You
and
can have
second.
that option. And you can, we'll bring it to the meeting, but you don't have to do first reading if when you have your second look at the budget, there's things you want us to change, there's still time to defer the first reading.
No, I think you'll hear from the waste contractor, for example, that, guess what, our recycling fees.
I've had many conversations with him. He understands I'm basing my budget on the numbers he gave me.
That he told
And
you.
he did give me the big increases, especially for organics.
Yeah, organics is going to be another issue. The Harvest Power isn't going to be the only one closing, from what I understand. Okay, let's move on to the next slightly more complex one, and that's the budget.
So this is the budget for the general fund, so everything except the utilities. And it's a little more preliminary. There's no capital and supplemental items in here. I have something that I can present at the end on table which shows, some staff ideas of what we'd like to see in capital and supplemental. But I do have a bit more than I usually do in a preliminary budget in here. As you can see from the notes, we do have the additional public work staff person that's allocated to the general fund. And we had railroad grade crossings that were in the 2017 budget that we didn't get a grant for, but we are required to do, so I have one of the railway grade crossings in here. And I also have the planner that we spoke about extensively at the strategic planning sessions, so the 3-day-a-week planner. I have the cost of that in here as well. So overall, if you go to the page 26 of 100, that's kind of a summary of all the departments. So we can go to each department and look at the details of each department, but overall, with what I have now, again, with a 0% increase in taxation, which as staff I'm actually not recommending, but I wanted to sort of start at the lowest level. We have a cash surplus of $138,000. I wouldn't even though I'm showing that as sort of an exact number, that is just ballpark, because for the next meeting, I'll go through these numbers again. We want to take a second look at them to see if there's any additional savings. I'll be able to firm up some of the costs, like the insurance costs. There's a few costs that I have in here that are estimates. But it's just to sort of give you a sense of what a 0% tax increase would give you. We're looking at about $138,000 of a surplus. But it's not really a surplus. That is what we would have to use for our capital expenditures in the general fund and our supplementals. And then I anticipate sort of the next couple of meetings being focused on the additional things we have to add to the budget. So I don't know if you wanted me to go through department by department, or if you've had a chance to go through and you just have questions, which approach you'd
Sorry,
like to take.
a very fundamental
sorry.
one. How does this 138 arise? Those numbers above are supposed to add to 138?
Basically, I have my revenue, my expenses. I've rebudgeted the clean water, wastewater, but of course it's essentially a net zero because I've also rebudgeted the grant and the loan.
Yeah.
The gas tax funding, the reason I'm showing that coming off is because we receive that money and we're required to put it into a reserve until we spend it on a project. So I can't show it as revenue coming in. And then I've also removed the surpluses from the water because I show all the revenue in here and all of the expenses. So at the end of the day, that's what's left for the general fund. So we've taken care of water, sewer, solid waste. With a 0% tax increase, that gives you kind of a ballpark sense of how much money we have to spend on our capital this year and our supplementals.
Yeah, so it's hard to work. So we're mixing capex and operating costs in the water budget. So we come up with a surplus of $2.5 million in 2018. But the operating surplus is not a surplus, it's a deficit.
It's positive.
No, it's a surplus. Like what I'm saying is this is consolidated with water and sewer. It's because I can't really split out the revenue. So I have the revenue, the expenses, and the capital that we know we have to do, the water capital. And I'm removing the water surplus because we don't want to spend it twice. Like what I'm saying
Oh, that's
is at the
just
end
a
of the
removal,
day,
that's not what it is.
Yeah,
So
the
you're removing
130
119,000
Yeah.
surplus.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, I know it's sort of it's how I have to do it to get it to balance, but the cash surplus is for what I call the general fund. So not water, sewer, solid waste, and it's a ballpark. Like don't think of it as exact number because it's going to be evolved as we
okay.
go through future meetings. But that's about what you have at this point in time for your supplemental and your capital expenditures for the general fund.
Now, how is it that we don't move the land sale number out of 2017 and into 2018?
Well, either way, I mean, I could, but it would just be an in and out because in the 2017 budget, it goes straight into a reserve. I mean, it will be available to borrow from for some of the capital, which will be a decision we'll make when we're going through the supplemental and the capital requests.
Okay.
Yeah, the purpose of the summary page is just to give you a sense of how much money is left over. It's what I do every year, so we sort of know what we have left, and then we start talking about the supplementals.
So
and
the
capital.
extra, the 3-day-a-week planning person, where does that come? Where do we see that?
You see that in the planning, so did you want to go through each department?
Well, maybe,
or-
but I see planning going from 120 to 73. I'm wondering how that adds 3/5 of a person.
Easier to look at the planning page.
Maybe decrease consultants.
I mean, basically, the 86,000 of that, I just, one of the reasons is, I don't have the rebudgets in here yet, because it would distort the bottom line. Because essentially, if we've already taxed for it, I'm not gonna put it in here again, because it'll be like we're taxing for it again. So when I do the final budget, I put it in, and we essentially draw from the 2017 surplus.
So we didn't spend all of
So
our
all I
plan.
have in
We-
here
we-
is the
we
additional
prepaid
amount.
for the planner.
We prepaid for the planner. So essentially, it's an excellent way of putting it. So if you go to the planning page, I'm showing 36,310. That's what we need for the 3-day planner, plus the rebudget. But if I put the rebudget in here,
Yeah.
then I'd be showing that we were taxing for it again.
So we'll see our 2017 budget actual sometime, although this is what we taxed for, and I'm hearing we didn't spend it, as we read it.
I actually have, after we've reviewed all this, I have a preliminary rebudgets and preliminary supplemental and capital that we can look at.
Okay, sorry, what's our pleasure? Do we want to go through the departmental budgets?
I've spent considerable time with this, and Pam answered the 2 questions I did have. So again, my thumbprint is on this. In terms of the page 26 of 100, I like the format with 0 increase showing 138 surplus, so we go from there. Flipping through the pages, the things that jump out are like, the building permit increase is good to see. I had the same point that you did about the land sale, whether it's a 17 if it didn't occur, but Pam's explained it can be in and out, so I'm fine with that.
And it will show in the final version of the
Yeah,
budget.
and you've done the deal about the professional fees and the planner, so we prepaid for the planner. And I think because we're not doing CapEx here, I was thinking, Carl, you've been quiet on council expenditures, so I'm looking forward to what you think we should have in the new palace upstairs when that time comes. And
Well, I was going to propose a hot tub, but I probably won't put it out.
on
So.
that flat area just by the window, gotta like that.
Yep.
The final thing, which was the only, and this is really getting picky, was on page 32 of 100, the communications, which you've noted includes 15,000 for annual radio levy. If this stuff is annual, how come it went up so significantly?
Yeah, that was a typo. I meant to say an additional 15,000. Fire and Public Works got new radios from
the
Ecom
old
this
new
year.
radios,
It's a
sorry,
total
okay.
capital purchase of about 125,000, which we pay over a 7.5-year levy. So there was an additional cost to that because we've been using board radios up till now. So again, I'll be finalizing that number because I haven't got the final number from Ecom yet. But that's another thing actually, and I should have pointed out, we've absorbed in this budget. We put it in the 5-year plan. We knew in 2018 the radio costs were going to go up fairly significantly, but the good news is they're wonderful radios. Fire loves them. Public Works really likes them. Our radios literally were almost held together with Scotch tape until we replaced
So
them.
the other ones are gone now.
They're gone.
Because I must say, when I used to sign checks, I would say every 5th check was for some radio or something. We had,
It was the rental
all of our,
costs for the public.
all of our
works.
radios even had their own radios. It was that complicated.
So that actually was a mistake. It
Okay.
should have been includes an additional
Wasn't
15,000.
trying to trip you up, but
No.
anyhow. So for the balance of the stuff, I actually, Pam's answered it for us in her notes, so I'm fine as it sits.
Thanks. I only have one, and where is the parking revenue? Is
Yeah,
that administration?
I don't have that in there yet. We can talk about that with the supplementals because there's going to be additional costs. So to be conservative at this point, I mean, it will go in to the final budget, but I'm sort of thinking more of a net zero.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that's actually the point I was going to head towards. Is that, yeah, if council approves the final pay parking provisions plan, 4 Ps, I would hope that it includes increased bylaw enforcement hours. So any increase in revenue will be offset by what we're actually trying to achieve, which is compliance, not enforcement. Okay, good. I'm fine with that.
So the bare bones bylaw stuff's already in this, so.
That's right?
It is.
Oh, yes.
Staffing?
It is.
Yeah.
Which mirrors last year at the full banana, whether the guy was there or not. So fine, different issue.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I
just-
think really Pam's accomplished what our aim for her was to give us the bare bones budget and less what staff's gonna come forward with.
I don't see any gaping holes or any surprises for that matter. Although, now we've given the nod around the table on the water budget, which accounts for half an additional public works person. I don't want that to just sort of come along for the ride. We are going to have to just ensure that we all understand. We're talking about one extra employee. I don't need to remind you, in the village, there is a groundswell of misinformed opinion that we have enough public works people. So this is something, this will be a political decision that we will need to defend. Where is the rest of it in public works, right?
Yes.
And
It's in the
parks.
salary
yes,
line.
right.
Parks,
page.
yeah.
And this person, specifically this person itself may not be doing, 50% of the work on water. It's just how we all account
No, it's an
it.
allocation.
It's just
No,
when
we
we put
understand
all
that.
of them together. And actually I didn't want to be for transparency, I actually have 1.2 additional public works people in here. There's a current 4-day-a-week public works employee who we've bumped to full-time. So we've absorbed that as well. So it's actually a 1.2 increase. But further to your point of public perception, I think the core services review that we're going to be discussing will really lend itself to, if you need support for why we're recommending increasing staff.
It's a communications piece. I don't think anybody around this table would dispute for one instant that we need the resource.
And we were pushing for the person who hired the person last year, but they refused to take the allocation.
Say that again?
We were being
We
conservative.
were pushing
rated.
for the extra person for public works last year, and they refused to take the allocation.
Fred, you had a point?
Oh, yeah, all that good stuff. Slightly different. I'm looking under the general fund on council,
On what page?
30 of 100.
Yes.
Under election, I'm curious why the 2017 budget was for 14,000
It is accurate, isn't it?
and the
Yes.
2018 is for 4,000 when this is
Apologize.
the election year.
Yes, I had a comment under there which the CIO and I had discussed adding and it got cut off when I printed it. Basically, how it works, municipalities do elections because they know that they have them every 3 or 4 years. They budget $4,000, however much they need. And in our case, I'm saying $4,000 a year. So after 4 years, we'll have the $16,000 we need. So you'll notice that the $4,000 expense is in every year. Last year, I had to budget an additional $10,000 because we knew we had to have a by-election. So that was a one-time budget. But for income smoothing and just, so we, it's quite a common practice for municipalities to budget every year for the election and essentially put it into reserve. So this year, I'll be drawing from that to. So in the final budget, what you'll see is money being transferred from reserves to cover the election, and then I will put the election cost, the full election cost in here.
So that bylaw actually only cost $3,691.
Sorry, the bylaw?
By-election.
By-election.
Because 4,000 of that 7,691 is the standard annual charge.
No, actually, it costs 7,600. I haven't actually done, that's a year-end entry I do, where I book the 4,000.
Okay, so that was pretty accurate. The budget was accurate. Well, the budget was actually under budget by $3,600. Okay, small potatoes. Okay, so, I mean,
That's good.
Jim, looks like you had something.
No, I raised some questions earlier, but the point is that from what I see in here, it looks pretty well thought out. And, you know, I had some questions earlier on staff stuff and things like that, but it's all been explained. I don't think there's any issues there. I was concerned about the training budget, stuff like that, but it looks like it's all well thought out, so I think.
How fleshed out is this fire operating budget?
I sat down with the fire chief and, sorry, the page.
32.
And we went through it line by line, and, yeah, I think it's pretty well thought out. About half of the numbers they actually come from me because, you know, things like insurance and things we do here in head office. And then the fire chief goes through and he he goes with his staff as well to indicate any additional things you need. For example, the turnout gear now, they usually budget every year for turnout gear, but because of the grant we got in 2017, they had their full turnout gear, plus they were able to purchase an additional 5 sets. So there's no budget required this year for turnout gear, but they did ask for an additional $13,000 for just their general uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, we go through it line by line, and
How many people are we talking about? 30?
it's closer to 28. And right now, again, they were fully staffed finally for about 7 months, and now that transition of volunteers are being hired on full time, so they're losing 5 or 6, and now they're recruiting new firefighters to replace those.
$500 per person per unit for uniforms.
How much was that?
464. $500.
It's a deal.
Is it a deal?
Yeah.
They get good service from that.
These are not turnout. This is not turnout yet. This is uniforms.
Oh, uniforms, my mistake.
I can get, actually on that note, with some of these requests, I will get more information for future meetings. This was,
It's a little rich, but where does the $14,000 decline in salaries and benefits come from?
that I based more on what we've actually been spending. We used to budget, there's 2 components of that. There's the on-call, which is when they get called out to the highway, and we know that's been down, but then the offsetting PEP revenue is down as well because they're having fewer accidents this year. And then the shift payments. So they have a certain quota of staff they want on call every weekend, and they get paid to be on call. And just historically, we've always been under budget on that. I usually budget based on assuming every single person who needs to be on call will be on call for the weekend, and the reality is that doesn't happen. So I changed the budget this year to reflect more what we actually spend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's good because again, we taxed for it.
Question if I could. Comparing the budget, the fire budget and everything, it's gone up in the training, for example, but it just seems like it's a very similar amount to the decrease in the revenue from call-outs on the highways. There's no correlation on there, is there?
For training?
It's somewhat for the on-call portion. Oh, not to the training, no.
Not to the training? Okay.
No, but there is to essentially the salaries, that for the on-call portion of that was down this year, which is offset by the decrease in the PEP revenue.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, fire is not insignificant. $324,000 item. That's $30 million for fire, out of a $3 million operating budget. 10% of the budget. Okay.
Are there any other questions, or?
Of course. Well, I had one, but I'll just finish what I was going to say. This is the tail that wags the dog. Of course, what's important now is supplementals, capital and operating. Do you have any sense of where we're going with that?
Yes, I have actually an on-table report that I was going to.
Oh, you said so already.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reason I'm on table, I'm conscious that we want to speed up the budget process, and it wasn't at all to make any decisions now because I recognize it's on table. It was more as a takeaway, and then that would be the topic of the next meeting where we talk about the budget. Is to any other questions you might have about this. I will fine tune this budget as I get firmer numbers, but would be to talk about the supplementals and the capital and council to bring forward, what they'd like to see as well.
Okay, thanks.
So I did have actually one note myself. If you go to Parks and Recreation, so on page 34 of 100, I took the opportunity, I don't normally do this, to list out what all of the municipal grant requests were.
Okay, so this was going to be my other
yeah,
point. So,
okay, so I'm just going to, sorry, if I could just finish. In the past, we've had the larger municipal grant requesters to come to a CSC meeting and do a brief presentation, and it gives council an opportunity to speak to it. And I would recommend that this year because we have a couple of, we have one new one, the Lions Bay House Concerts is requesting $7,800. And then Lions Bay Arts Council were suggesting a few changes to their grant. They wanted the municipality to actually start paying for the banners. Normally they ask for that in their grant. So that would be one option if council wanted to continue to do that, because I would need to know today so I could give people notice for the next meeting to come in. The other option is, which I do anyway, as part of that package, you would get copies of all the municipal grants, so you'd have a chance to look after them. What happens with these grants, Norm, is we have an application that has to be filled out, so anyone who wants a municipal grant sends in an application. They give financial information, they give details of what their grant requests are, and then they form part of the budget, but they come in usually and do a presentation, and then council can opine on whether or not they want to accept this. So I've put in everything they've requested, but by no means does this mean that it has council approval yet in terms of that what we will agree to for a municipal.
so
grant.
that I was going to ask, what's council's opinion on this guy? $3,100, including the in-kind costs, which is essentially opportunity cost.
3,100 for senior circle, you mean?
31,000, I mean, sorry.
Oh,
Well, the one that jumps out is house concerts.
Yeah, it certainly jumps out.
Well, it jumps out, period. And I think without looking at an application, I mean,
We'd have to see, yeah.
I'd have to see it, but off the surface, I think they had one larger event at the Lions Bay Beach. I think that was the White Dinner. That wasn't them.
That was just a community
So
event. Yeah.
take that one out. That was the one deal knockoff. So I think the house concerts are limited to the number of community members that go to, for instance, Fred's house.
And pay $40 to $60 for
Yeah.
the privilege.
And so it's a combination of a private government thing here. So I'd like to see the application.
I'd
before I
certainly like
apply.
to see the application as well, at that level for sure. Something Louis mentioned today was the Community Scholarship Foundation. I was not perhaps aware that council funded it at all or in its entirety. Is this just a contribution?
yeah, in the past, they've never asked for anything monetary. It's always been
Get
just
it.
in kind. They just need the hall a couple of times for presentations. This year, they have requested some monetary because of the 15th anniversary. There's a few things they wanted to do, and that's outlined in their grant.
But not
you're
for the
right.
grant itself, but
No, not for the grant itself.
for the celebration around
Yes,
it.
for the
Okay.
celebration, and that's detailed in their municipal grant. But you are correct, this is the first time they've ever asked for a monetary contribution. It's always just been the in-kind. And just, to define what the in-kind is, Events Committee is a good example. They rent the hall a lot for their events. They have their Halloween party, and Canada Day. Their Public Works does a lot of setup for them. So even though this is kind of an in and an out, it's not a cash outlay for it, we're not essentially taxing for it, we'd like to quantify it just so council's aware that there is Public Works time, particularly it's taken up for the groups, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because we're not large enough to be able to have our own Canada Day celebration like most municipal grants. Like most municipalities do, we need the events committee to organize it for us. But it's also the hall rentals. The seniors are a good example. They have a Tai Chi every week, which is very popular in the hall. So we basically let them have the hall for free.
We just waive the fee, yeah.
Yeah, we waive the fee. So that's sort of a quantification of
Yeah, that's good.
the revenue.
Okay, so that was the point I was gonna make, Peter.
So I guess the direction that we'd like to have from council is the organization of presentations of these, the larger grant applications.
Well, certainly only for the larger, and I suspect that we may just actually have some cherry picks. Some of them are no surprise. I'll start the ball rolling. I'd like to see what the events committee has in mind. Arts Council and house concerts. That's my only three.
So not
So-
senior circle. Oh, sorry.
No,
So you not wanting to see them means you're not interested in improving them, or you just,
no.
they're just too small to.
Knowing what I already know and knowing what the amounts are, I'm fine with that as a.
It just so what you're deciding is whether or not they come here and present to you,
No,
not
no,
whether
yeah.
you see their application. You
Sure.
will see the application.
Oh, we'll see all the applications.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, this
All
is
the
a,
applications.
this is an in-person,
Lot.
fairly long presentation, right? Because
Okay.
we give them 10, but it takes 20.
Actually, we usually give them 5, and then we allow time for questions.
Yeah.
But usually, we need about an hour. Well, depending, an
Depending
hour,
how many,
45
yeah.
minutes to an hour, depending on how many.
Or do we want to not be cherry picky and say if it's over X thousand dollars, you have to come?
I agree.
I was just gonna suggest that, maybe anything over $2,000, they come and get the presentation.
2,000 total, so that's easy to do. That's
4.
all the ones over 2,000.
Events committee, senior circle, arts, and house concerts would be the 4.
Anybody else really want to reduce that threshold to catch somebody else? The Sea to Sky Invasive Species Council, 1,500.
I really only want to see the,
We
I
get
don't-
we get a good bang for the buck on that one, I can tell you.
Yeah, you'll be getting a report from
Yeah.
them.
And they have a very detailed municipal grant application. Last year was the first time we actually gave them a municipal grant. And
Do they not want more? Is I guess where I'm going.
I think this year they have the 1,500, and they'll show that they collect it all along the Sea to Sky, and it goes into a pool. But when we want additional work for them, we did have an additional $2,500 of work
Out of Public
that-
Works operating.
that they did for us this
Yeah.
year.
For invasive species removal or something else?
Yeah, invasive species treatment,
A treatment.
yeah,
I'd like,
and mapping.
I'd like to see the 4 events committee. I don't know what the senior circle is doing, but it's $4,600. Arts Council and the house concerts. Those live data beforehand. The rest, fine.
Anybody else? Okay, so that's your guidance there.
So that would be January 23rd
In the CSC.
in the CSC. Because we're still planning to have the budget CSC on the 23rd, I believe, or...
I don't know.
Yeah, that'll
We'll
be a
have to-
conversation
it'll be a
that-
conversation.
To be continued, but I
Okay.
do know you want to see those 4, and thank you.
Very good.
Pam, you're accelerating on a lot of this stuff. Thank you very, very much. And you're gonna bring the CapEx request shortly. I don't know, and there's been some chatter about this, about previous CapEx that we taxed for, but money wasn't spent. I don't know whether the maze system allows for you to press 2 buttons and that pops out as some kind of a report, or do you have to go back for a period of budgets?
You mean to
Where I'm-
determine what the rebudgeting is?
Well, maybe some things weren't rebudgeted at all, they were just left in limbo.
Well, some things,
Yeah, I have asked for
Yeah.
that report as well. I didn't actually see that on the IRRs.
So it should come, I'm thinking, with the CapEx request, or,
I identify the capital and the major operating that wasn't spent, that we're planning to rebudget. But then I will also I'm planning to do a 4th quarter review in February, and I can't do it before then because most of the January expenses that come in are still 2017 expenses, in which case you'll be able to see what the overall surplus was.
what about
For-
prior years?
So
And
you're
that's-
asking for things that have been budgeted for, taxed for, but never followed through
Yeah.
on?
Yeah. And not rescinded.
And
Or,
not
or
rescinded. Well,
officially repurposed.
Well, there's reasons for that. Councils change, we get on to different things, and we get working on bigger projects or something like
Well,
that.
essentially, you see that number in the financial statements through your accumulated unallocated surplus, and it's a combination of reserves.
Yeah, we need to know what's in it,
and,
though.
But if we were taxing for
A bus stop.
the bus stop,
Yeah.
for example, and
Luckily,
Makes
somebody
sense.
remembered, but
Yeah,
only
we did.
because somebody remembered.
So that means we don't have to dig around. So I mean, it really, I'm trying to get you a core list that.
Of undelivered taxable projects, yeah.
That would be in perpetuity and updated in a way, and I'm not trying to do the job because I don't understand how to get the data. So I'd be happy to leave this with you to find a way to do that or explain it to us if you can't, versus going the IRR
Yeah.
route.
Well, I actually asked Peter for that in our last meeting, and backed it up with an email day before yesterday. So it's in the process.
Well, generally, a surplus is an unallocated surplus. Unless council gives direction that they want to move something that we're taxed for into reserve, like since I've been here, we've just rebudgeted. We put it back into the budget and then we've spent it. I mean, the bus stop was a little bit of an anomaly because we had specifically taxed for a bus stop.
We specifically
but-
tax for everything, because we've never taxed
We
for
did.
reserves.
But
So-
generally, I mean, in the council, for example, I mean, sometimes we're favorable in salaries, there's a minutiae of things that we can be favorable and unfavorable in, and municipalities generally finish the year with a surplus because they're not allowed to go into a deficit. They'd have to draw from reserves if they did, and that flows into unallocated surplus. So in terms of identifying, I mean, I've identified this year what we're planning to rebudget. Since I've been here, I have identified the rebudgets, but it wouldn't be possible for me to go back before that. It's the major capital we rebudget for, and then council makes
I
a
think we all want to
decision.
know how many other bus shuttles are out there.
I guess, okay, so Pam says she can't do it.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I think I can go back a couple of years, but I'm saying when you approve, at the end of the year, when you have that surplus, just per accounting standards, it just flows into general surplus, and you can use it for whatever you want.
Yeah, I think our concern is
And-
far more what the taxpayers are expecting to get for their money. Whether they actually know they were paying for a bus shelter 10 years ago
Yeah.
or not, I don't know.
But on the
but-
note, I think that one was a bit of an anomaly. I can go back a couple of years, just these things. But what I'm saying is, council essentially says when you approve the financial statements, that things have flown
Okay.
into unallocated surplus. But there's an advantage of that. There's just, if I could just finish, it's not restricted. Like we have restricted reserves, and when money go, like the gas tax funding, that's in a restricted reserve, and we're restricted to what we can use it for. You actually, especially when you don't have a lot of reserves, you want it to be in unallocated reserves, because even though that was allocated for a bus stop, you can choose to spend it on whatever you want.
I think we all understand that. I think what we're thinking is far more politically, given that we're all politicians around the table. We, or previous councils, made promises to the taxpayers, and we would like to know what they are.
But each year, you have the opportunity to say, we will rebudget and follow through on that. We didn't get it done this year, we'll do it this year. If you let it drop off the table, you're basically saying,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
no longer a priority,
Okay,
we're not
well,
gonna
I wish I
pursue
was that
that.
smart in my first term, Peter, I gotta be honest. And Fred was smarter, but he was quiet all the time. So let's try this then, so I'll accept that. So Pam has suggested she can go back during her tenure. So are we able to go back, let's say, 3 years during this council's?
Well, I
period?
think we all know the answer to that question. There's nothing that we haven't delivered that we haven't formally taken off the budget.
Yeah.
We have reversed certain items saying, hey, we ain't going to do that because it's been
Okay.
superseded or whatever. No, it's from long ago stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so Pam has said no to that, or can't be done.
I was hoping for colour uplighting under the underpass was previously
I'm
approved.
saying it can't be done, but I'm also saying it's not so much, even if I could do it, we've accepted when we accept the financial statements that any unspent money, unless we specifically allocate it to something, goes into general surplus. And that's actually what you want it to do, because then you can use that surplus in the reserves for anything you want.
Yeah, but then we
So
end
it's
up
not like
taxing the
we've lost-
taxpayers the second time for the same project.
Exactly.
So just because I'm
Yeah, no, this is kind of
fresh
overwhelming
into
to
the
you.
frame. No, it's not overwhelming at all. I
It's
don't
just-
understand the value in going up our
Yeah.
back. That's
Well,
a general
I
comment.
now realize that, I mean, for a variety of reasons, we're trying to accelerate the budget process, so to have Pam do sideways work is probably not the most productive at this moment.
Yeah, the second comment is, I thought we had a fairly comprehensive list of things we were getting done for taxpayers. Is that list not comprehensive enough?
This council, but apparently there was a bus shelter budget a long time ago.
It's going to haunt me forever. I do think that was a bit of an anomaly.
I-
But I do want to be
But-
clear
but
though.
those things
But no,
can
no.
come up.
Yeah.
I
okay.
guarantee you that there's steps at beaches, washroom renovations, tree
There might have been,
removals.
but if council at the time did not say they wanted to put it into reserve, we haven't done anything wrong. We followed PSAB. It's flowing into
Okay,
surplus.
well,
No, but this is an important point. The money is still there. It's just, it's in a big pool.
Pam,
Instead,
I think we'll understand the
well,
accounting
I'm not sure we
nicely.
do,
So-
because you keep asking me like, can I do it? I'm saying you're asking me to do something that I don't need to do in
I
a
think
sense.
it's not a financial question. It's a minutes question. What has been promised to the taxpayer that we haven't delivered? We,
So
meaning
maybe
the
it's a
general
case
council.
of providing council with the list of resolutions, and you can go.
I don't know how we would
through
do it.
them and search
Alright.
for things.
Because that's
that-
actually how we found the bus shelter, so it was through a
Right.
resolution.
Well,
what
that's
I
how these things
supported.
happen, right? In theory.
Yeah.
I've got it, in the spirit of moving on in a positive way, I've heard what I need to hear. I wish I was smarter in my first term. It's much smarter the second term and a much better.
I would
drive.
take you a bet that you budgeted some kind of beach renovation.
I don't even wanna go there.
I know we've budgeted several here, but they've just all been carried
Okay,
forward.
so
One
I
hopes.
retracted, I'm not looking at that part. I'm good, thank you.
Okay, good. So that was a question I had as well. So you can take that off the list. I don't think it was ever on the list, but that's fine. So
So I had one other thing, so I had these random notes. I'm the one who's really overwhelmed with everything I'm trying to convey to you. We know that there's another clean water wastewater grant coming out this year. We don't know when it's coming, we don't know when it'll be due. So I actually haven't put it into the budget, but, so what I'm recommending is when we get the information, we determine what project we do. Again, hopefully it will be a net zero impact on the taxpayer, as was the first clean water, unless we go over, and that it'll be funded by a combination of the grant and the loan. But what I'm recommending to council is that when we do find out about the next clean water wastewater, which will probably be late spring, and we determine the due date, we find out whether or not we get the grant. At that time, we'll do a budget amendment, and that's actually fairly common practice with municipalities. I would then show it, because I do have to budget for it, but there's no point guessing right now.
Yep.
So that's gonna happen in 2018?
Yes, we
And
do
you,
believe.
and there are resources to pursue that grant?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
whether we get it's well, I won't jinx any application, but we got a pretty big one this year or last year.
Last time we actually applied for, applied for 2 and we got 1. So we have 1 ready to go for the PRBs. And we're also thinking of Bayview Road, but that'll be council's decision if we apply for 2, if we apply for 1. But
I
at
guess-
that time, sorry.
So what I'm getting at is if
Yeah.
we really want to win a grant, would it make sense to budget money for some help to win a grant? So for a consultant or some way to throw some horsepower behind an application?
But we do have in the budget the Bayview Road design, which would help us. But those are.
You mean in terms of writing the grant
Right,
application?
okay, sorry.
Yeah, having like a
Yeah.
consultant
Yes.
figure out the best way to apply for a
Mhm.
successful grant application.
Yeah.
There's the consultant.
So so internally, the 3 of us wrote the first grant
Okay.
application. We do have a consultant helping us with the infrastructure, the
IPG?
asset
grant,
management.
yes.
Yeah.
No, the IPG I did.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's just a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
no, it is something we can
Now,
consider.
the Mid Bayview Road project, road drainage project, you were going to change the scope on that one, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to need planning help on that, or is that coming along
That's
for the
part of
right?
That's what the IPG grant application was for.
Okay.
Is for the additional design that's
So, I mean,
required.
Norm's point is the right one, but you've actually got to cover it.
For the planning, for the design.
Yeah.
When it comes to the clean water, wastewater.
Oh, yeah, but that's, yeah.
Yeah.
And just remind us, just so that, because I think some people here haven't heard, so we did what was the cost of the project? $80,000, $24,000, $48,000 for the Mid Bayview Road design, drainage,
I think it
Canberra.
was
30 something.
30.
Yeah.
Okay, so I got the numbers right, but a fairly substantial design project, which spoke to drainage, culverts, sumps, swales, all that stuff, recambering, and then we realized that as a result of
The water tank project and increasing the size of Harvey Tank to incorporate fire flow for MAG, there's 700 meters of water main that needs upgrading that we need to add to that project.
it happens to be running down Mid Bayview,
Yeah.
so that has to be designed in to the scope of the project, which will then change the scope of the application as well,
Right.
in the spirit of not digging up the road twice, which could also be done.
Mm-hmm.
So, my question around all this is, and most times we've always been on the same page with this, and that is that, so we know money's coming, we know there may be the ability to get a grant, okay? So, what's on the shelf that we can say, okay, here's the project, we apply for this and go from here. So that's what we're talking about right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we've got two.
Our
Exactly.
plan is to
We've
have
got
two,
two.
the mid-Bayview and the PRVs.
Okay,
Yeah.
so how close are we to having, like, do we have as much research done as possible so that we can act fairly quickly? That's my question.
I think it's incorporated in the budget process, yeah.
Good, that's fine.
Yeah, I think
trust
they're
that.
very
That's
well
good.
on that.
Yeah, that's good.
You don't want another one shelf ready. I mean,
No.
shovel ready on the shelf.
I don't think so, not at this point.
Yeah. Okay, Pam, what else you got on your
So
list?
that'll be the first time I would have ever done a budget amendment, but I think it's the most prudent way to do it. It's just too much of an unknown. If I needed to tax in order to do that, then I would have to put it in this budget, but it's essentially
Yeah.
a net zero proposition.
Although there
just
will
like
be
the
some
Clean Water
slightly
was.
increased interest payment on the loan, because we'll be borrowing an extra 400,000, 200,
Exactly,
300.
but that wouldn't come in until 2019, because
Yeah.
we won't be going for the spring boring. It would be tight to even go for the
Yeah.
fall boring. And even if we go for the fall borrowing, then the first payment doesn't come until 2019.
Yeah, it's no operating impact.
Because you're
So-
exactly right, there is an increased
So
cost.
then, hence,
Yeah.
that's another reason to make sure we've got some sort of a surplus floating
Yes.
around somewhere, so we can pull from that if we have to, and that's,
Oh.
yeah, we've talked about that earlier.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah.
yeah, that's another thing that we could draw from, because it
Yeah.
would be a.
Are you
warrant
advocating
project
budgeting a
we were
slush
applying
fund?
for.
Surely not.
That we received the budget.
I don't think Pam's fully finished yet, and I've got one more point.
Sorry.
You got, are you?
Actually, no, that was the
That
last
was the
thing on
last
my
one?
list, thank you.
Just talk to us again about this railroad crossing thing.
Oh,
If
yes,
I
thank
read this right, this means we're gonna do it regardless of a grant?
We have to do it. Sorry, what page is that? The public
Well,
works.
there's have to and there's have to, you know.
I'll let the public works manager
I can
speak
talk to
that.
our federal friends and say, hang on a sec, dudes. You gotta give us some money for this.
That would be my preference.
Yeah.
In applying for the grant, so the second application for the grant was denied. And essentially.
How do they expect us to build these crossings then?
Essentially, the discussion I had with I don't want to say chair, the manager of the plant, a doctor, PhD in engineering. We're too small and our crossings don't generate the traffic volume that would be required to win us a grant. She did suggest that we could speak to the local transportation representative for BC and speak to them.
Which body?
Transport Canada.
Okay, yeah.
So speak to the local representative for BC and Transport Canada and push our case with them because they do provide input into the grants. But based on what we've submitted and the volume of traffic that crosses, vehicular traffic that crosses our railway crossings, we do not qualify for grants.
Okay, that's fine. But so we had budgeted 107 for the project, of which we were going to stump up 20%. That's in round numbers, let's say $21,000. Plus the 35 that's in the budget now. That's a $56,000 project. How did it go from 107 to 56?
No, so-
There's two projects that we have to do by 2021. So Pam has split them up.
So this is one of them.
Basically, there's
Yeah.
this account, the number you're looking at has a lot of maintenance in it, it's not just the railway crossing. So the base amount for the railway, we have our annual rent that we have to pay. So the railway crossing, you're right, it was about 21,000, so I rebudgeted that, and we're planning to do, we're basically budgeting 35,300 to complete work on the Kelvin Grove grade crossing this year, offset by the rebudget of about 21. So the net impact will be about 14,000 this
Sorry,
year.
offset by what?
The rebudget of the difference. I'm rebudgeting the 20%, the difference between the grant and the 84.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a $56,000 project.
No, the rebudget from last year is 21.
Yeah.
21. And I'm budgeting,
An additional
this includes
35.
the 35.3 offset by the 21. So I only have about $14,000 in the budget for this. Like you're looking at the
okay. So the
entire
project cost is
maintenance
35
budget.
something.
Yeah, yeah. And then the plan is in 2019 to do the One Brunswick Beach crossing at 32,445. I mean, those costs obviously in 2019 will.
yeah.
And then in 2020 to do the original one because it must be done by 2021.
Correct.
And we wanted to give ourselves a bit of a cushion so in case something came up in one of those years.
So each one's about 30,000, 35, let's say.
Brunswick is double
Because
because
it's
it's got
bigger,
two
yeah,
tracks.
yeah. Okay, well, that's big money.
It is.
100% taxpayer funded, we're gonna have to do something about that. Okay, that's for me.
Yeah,
So I-
I'll be speaking to people.
I will forward you the correspondence I received from Ottawa.
Yeah. No, that's ridiculous.
So we're being conservative, we have this in here. That's not to say, as Nye has said, we're not still going to continue to try and preserve funding and use your help, but.
What are
we do
the
need to
penalties
have
for
to
not
them.
doing it? Simply refusing? As, for example, West Van, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, still refuses to pay the crossing maintenance fee.
That's not the Transport Canada, that's a CN
CN,
issue.
yeah.
This is a Transport Canada federal regulation.
This is a- this is
It's an
a-
act, the Railway Safety Act, which we
Okay.
would be in contravention of.
Okay, that's a little more serious.
Mhm.
Okay. This is not a quasi-governmental organization, it's an actual government organization.
So who puts out the spec for how that crossing gets built and designed?
Transport Canada and the Rail Safety Board in Ontario developed the standards. It was gazetted and turned into an act.
I'll just tell you, you non-politicians around the table, why this is a real problem is because that the village will say the railroad crossings don't serve the village. They only serve the people who live below it, and that's not a lot of people. Well, it's certainly not half the village. So, this is the rest of the village subsidizing people's roadways. So that's how communities work. But I have already heard rumblings about the railroad crossings, just the maintenance.
Well, one question I've got is, why are not in the rental of our theoretical space there that we're renting from them, do they not factor in the repair costs to maintain it? And why is there an extra bill when we're already paying rental on it?
Because the maintenance cost is ours.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not our property.
I know. It's a crappy lease. It's a
That's-
crappy deal.
That's when some government sold BC Rail to a private company. Sorry, did I say private? A national railroad company.
Or got bought out by a private company.
Yeah. It was well, you remember the government fell because of it, because there was some money changing hands. Yeah, it was a crap deal. We got left holding the baby. I mean, we have quite a large number of railroad crossings for a community of our size, but that's the reality.
Well,
Okay.
well, the reality is that it's a railroad that runs through our municipality. There is a railroad crossing there because we do have residents that cross that, either be it because they live down there or because they're going to the beach or whatever they're doing down there. So it still falls upon the village line,
Yeah.
no matter how you look at it.
So this maintenance standard is the same for every railway crossing,
Yeah, across the nation.
regardless of how much traffic crosses it?
Regardless, it's based, the calculations and the distances are based on volume of traffic and sight lines, but the maintenance level is standard across the nation,
Despite lower traffic.
despite lower traffic.
Road traffic, you mean?
Yeah, how many people are crossing? You don't have to maintain it as often if it's only being crossed 10% of the time.
Yeah, no.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the Carbon Grove crossing. It's a nightmare.
Okay.
It looks
Well,
like
if
it's
needs to
never
be
been-
replaced. That's
Oh, I don't think there's any dispute there. It's just
Yeah.
the timing and who pays for it. And the timing is the same for everybody, or
Everybody, 2021, yeah.
okay. Leave the funding questions with me for now. I will make some representations. I'm composing the email in my head. Okay, so that was the final point I had. Any others?
Should we do this before we receive the report, the on table?
maybe.
Okay, sorry, I do have the on table, the supplementals, so.
Yes, because that's it for budget reports. Let's do it before. No, in fact, that's a separate report that's not even in the agenda package. So we'll receive the report that we've seen, and then
It's not really a report though, it's just
Just some additional information, supplemental information.
yeah, but the motion is to receive the report that the public has seen in their package
Well, this will be added to the.
to the on-table items. Okay,
on-table
fair enough.
items.
Okay.
I will pass it on. So what I have here is, I've identified what we're rebudgeting this year. And just kind of a high, well, not high level, but just proposed capital and supplemental requests from staff. And then some additional revenue that we can discuss. So on the first page, I have the rebudgets. We talked about the clean water tanks. Even though it's net zero, I wanted to show that we're rebudgeting the capital expenditure and rebudgeting the offsetting grant and loan. The detailed bridge inspections, I mean, they're 50%, the inspection part has been done, but now there's the report, so there's an additional 15,619 we'll have to rebudget to offset invoices that will be coming in. That's the remaining that's outstanding on
We
the
budgeted the
contract.
whole amount, because we approved doing it all in one shot, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
we
We
did.
raised the budget to
Yeah.
30,500 to
Yeah.
cover it all. Okay, Lions Bay Beach Park, this is the difference between what we budgeted and the small amount we paid for some electrical, so we have 29,000. So this can be put towards the Lions Bay Beach Park. Kevin Grove Stairs, we're rebudgeting those, but we should be able to use the proceeds from the land sale to offset the cost of that.
100%,
because-
yeah.
100%, yeah. The emergency generator, if you recall, we had budgeted one, 15,000 this year, and in the 5-year plan, we had 15,000 to come into 2018. You'll see that on the capital request, to either purchase two or purchase one, and I think we're leaning now towards just purchasing one. So that's why we're rebudgeting it. And that was the plan all along, was to kind of spread it over 2 years.
You may well ask why the generator, that's sort of the size of this room, more or less, behind the fire hall, is not of sufficient capacity, and the answer is no. Remind him,
It's maxed out,
it's maxed out
yeah,
in terms of nameplate capacity.
yeah. We had an electrician come in, take a look at it, it's maxed out for what it's doing.
That's not the answer we had last time. The answer last time, it was difficult to run the wiring between it was not to code.
No,
What is the capacity?
I don't know, I'd have to go back through my
Yeah,
emails.
okay.
But we did have an electrician come out, take a look at the generator, and it's a large beast, but it only puts out a certain amount of power, and it's all.
It's
allocated.
propane fired, so
Yeah.
it's propane fired, it's not gas powered. I still would like to know the nameplate capacity of that one. Can you
Sure.
let me have it?
And street signage, which I believe we spoke about in the last council meeting, the budget was 25, but we'd identified what the cost would actually be, so it's 13,460.
And what happens to the 25.5?
Would flow to surplus.
No, the resolution was to spend it on other things.
Okay.
And the resolution's in the minutes, so I'll just remind you. First on signage, then to utilize any budget remaining up to a total project cost of 4,000 to widen the boulevard on the east side of Bayview Road. And then, if anything's left, for the traffic signage requirements laid out in part 3 of the report, this being parking, and then if anything's left, no, that was it.
Yeah,
So it's
so
all-
this is the then that's everything left.
It's all inclusive. We'll talk more about the staff time involved in doing signage at the CSC.
Yeah, I didn't include it because we've talked about it does have to be staff time, so.
Okay, so just to remind council, the budget there was 25, 25.5,
So there's things you mentioned all add up to,
13.4.
yes.
Plus staff time.
13,460.
Staff time's
Staff time's
not a
on
cash
top of that,
cost.
but it's already in the budget, the staff time,
Yeah.
because.
It just means we won't be able to do something.
Yeah, it's an opportunity cost, not a cash cost.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep, okay.
So
Okay.
we've got more money in place than we actually need?
Yes, there'll be a difference that'll flow to surplus.
We could potentially decide this year to allocate that to community signage, but that's a different discussion.
Fire department AEDs, they've been ordered, they were just back ordered, so that's just, I mean, we'll be paying for them probably next week, but, the fire department hall exhaust system, the fire chief was a bit behind on that, he's obtaining quotes, it will be done, but we'll be rebudgeting it. And then the burn building, we're rebudgeting the 30,000. I know we've been rebudgeting it for a few years, but we're encouraged now that we're working on the building permit. We're very close to removing the stop work order on it. We've had engineer inspections, and we now finally see a way that we can get it completed and fall within engineer requirements. And we have Flinro approval as well. That was a big piece that we've been waiting for. And then I have a bit of a gap because the next ones are operational, but emergency management consultant, will we budget that at 20,000. The balance of the records management, we did do some map scanning, which we're continuing to do, but we'll budget 17.8. The asset management and the planning consultant. So this is the portion of the planning consultant we're budgeting to offset the cost that's already in the budget to bring it up to a 3-person-a-day planner.
So this is 30,600 that we had budgeted in 2017 that we didn't spend.
Yeah.
That we're just using for the
Which was
3-day-a-week
supplement.
person.
And in the budget now, I just have the 30,000, so it'll be the combined amount.
When does that person start?
Oh, actually, that's a good point. I budgeted to start at April 1st, because in all feasibility, by the time we post and hiring, we think it'll be a challenging position to fill. Oh,
that's
actually,
where
on
I'm
that
going with
note
that.
as well, I forgot to mention with the public works person that I've added to the budget, I have that effective May 1st. So basically, I've prorated the salary. It's not a full year's salary this year. Because realistically, I mean, well, it's already January 8th. By the time we post, first of all, council has to approve the budget, and then we have to post it. So it would be May 1st.
Was that person not in the 5-year plan? So you already have budget authorization?
Yeah, technically it would.
So, I mean, what
so
you
we
waiting
could-
for?
Well, I'd like to go through the CSC and talk about discretionary versus non-discretionary activities and where we'd like to allocate that person.
Yeah, but I think council's already given the nod on the person themselves.
Then that will flow into the job description. We'd have to have
Oh,
a
I see.
specific job
Okay. Yeah,
description.
fair.
And the reality is, as much as we'd like someone right away, I didn't want to overtax, essentially, that it would probably realistically, that's just 4 months away, or 3.5 months away, so
So you only budgeted an April 1st start?
May 1st start.
May 1st.
May 1st start,
Okay.
because I felt it was more realistic, and I didn't want to overtax.
Okay, so let's not go over this one too fast. So, council, I'll start out by pointing that $219,000 represents cumulatively, not all in 1 year, but cumulatively $11,000 per percentage point tax increase. That represents 19.9% tax increase that we didn't spend. Now that was over a few years, not 1 year, but even if you divide it by 2, there's still a 10% tax increase that we charged that we didn't spend. So,
But we are spending. I mean, that's an important point, that
Well,
it's not that we taxed and then didn't decide to do it. I mean, we are doing these projects, some of them quite soon.
no, I know some timing is a little difficult, but that's quite a large number. Be that all as it may, yeah, there's 10% of our annual budget we didn't spend.
But we've planned the process to spend it. We've got, like, we're in the process of doing it. This stuff takes time to happen. And so we may not have spent it yet, but we are in the process of. The money's in place.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is, if we knew that we weren't going to spend it that year, we should only tax for it next year. But
But we
otherwise,
didn't.
I know. So I guess where I'm going with this is it realistic with all the stuff that? This is an impossible to answer question. I know. I'm just pointing out that we taxed almost 20% that we didn't spend.
Yeah, no, it
It's
is a valid
good point.
point.
It's a valid point. It's a very valid point.
But we are spending it. I mean, sometimes you tax for it,
Eventually,
you don't
yeah.
spend
The
for it at
planning
all. and
process
that's-
allows us to do that. It may take us longer than we thought to do, but we're doing it.
Just like the bus stop.
Another
We've
way
got
of
to it
looking at it
eventually.
is, if we hadn't taxed for it, but we do want to do these projects.
It was nice
You
to
would
see
have
the bus
taken the
stop
hit
here
this
when I
year, and
pulled
then you
into
would have had a
Lions Bay.
huge tax increase
It
this
looks
year.
good.
Okay, the next page is, this is very preliminary. Again, it's more for homework, sort of having you have a takeaway of what staff is looking at, some of the projects we need to do, and for you to add to or agree to at, subsequent meetings. The first one is the Lions Bay Avenue stairs to the bus stop. We did have them in the budget for 2017, but the money was repurposed for a portion of the bus shelter, and then the grant that we had hoped to get was actually used for the bus shelter. So we do have quotes.
Well, no, the
on-
grant was actually killed, and I got a new grant that was for a bus shelter. So let's not mistake issues there. The other thing is that the bus.
It was the same grant.
Well, that's.
I actually
coincidental.
literally took the agreement,
Repurposed.
crossed out
Yes, I know,
stairs and
but-
put bus shelter.
I don't know why you're arguing these points. The grant was killed
Mm-hmm.
because we couldn't spend it, and so I got a new one. It may have the same name, but the grant was for a bus shelter. The other reason that we didn't do it was that we had originally supposed that the steps would cost
25.
25.
Mm.
In fact, they were going to cost 80. So,
In our defense, we did get a quote, but when we went
Oh,
out
sure, I
6
mean,
months later,
I don't think anybody's blaming anybody, but, and that is because there's billions of infrastructure dollars awash in the economy, and the contractors see us coming. There's no big mystery there.
So we've had a new quote, 80,000, very recently, so we're pretty comfortable with it.
Yeah, sorry, we've
Yeah.
had 2 quotes. One
sorry.
came in at 68 and one came in at 78. So we figure that if we go out for RFP at 80, We're hoping it'll be a lot less than that, but
Now, this number is
Say-
public, but, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's just how these things happen, so, yeah.
And would be applying for another TransLink grant for $40,000, so the net impact would be $40,000.
we've applied for that grant already.
Yeah, it was due December 31st, so now I applied for it.
And you think we'll get it?
Yeah, we'll get it. It's just, do we want to spend the 40,000? And we'll discuss that at the supplemental discussions.
So like I say, this is laying out what staff, at subsequent meetings, we'll be talking about this in more detail. We'll bring more information. I realize these are big numbers. I don't expect you to make any decisions based on something I have on a piece of paper. We would bring business cases with, the larger items.
Yeah, this is the first
The
time we're
emergency-
seeing this.
The emergency generators, again, we budgeted 15,000 last year. In the 5-year plan, we had an additional 15,000 this year, so the net impact this year would be 15,000 with the idea of purchasing a generator or generators this year. The asset management, one of the reasons we are rebudgeting the 2017, I talked to council about this at the third quarter review. We subsequently learned there were grants available, so we actually deliberately waited until this year to do it. So we've got quotes on an asset management plan for $30,000. Offset against that is the 2017 rebudget of 15. We'll be applying for a UBCM grant, and this is actually, the grant will be done by, we're going to hire someone to do the grant for us, because this is a grant, it's identified that you're a lot more successful if you have some assistant doing the UBCM grant. So the grant would be 15,000, 50%, and then that would leave a balance of 5,000 for 2018 expenditures, because once we get the asset management plan, then there'll be things that we have to start doing as well. This is going to be an ongoing project, this asset management, and as we've discussed, I think at the strategic plan, it is a requirement that all municipalities have an asset management plan in place to be eligible for any funding at all, any grant funding.
Yeah, I think council's been sold on that one.
Yeah.
Just
Okay.
talking about new grants, the FCM Green Infrastructure Grant, you looked into that?
I believe we looked into that for the UBC study. I don't remember, Peter, what the outcome of that was.
Or for the water?
For the mid-Bayview
Well,
project?
yeah.
Or,
Well, I can't remember. I mean, I sent you the material. Have we looked into the FCM
I
grant?
looked at it with respect to the UBCM.
But,
Sorry,
the
to
UBC.
the UBC,
Stuff.
hydrology
Stuff,
study,
but-
Yeah.
yeah.
but there was, there was some
Oh, that's right, and we've had this
key
discussion.
points that- Yeah. that
And I still have to persuade you that this is innovative and all that stuff.
You
Yeah.
have to persuade me. I've characterized all the information for the person at FCM, and
Oh.
they did not see it that way.
Oh, I didn't realize we'd
seemed to think
gone
that there
as far
was-
as-
That they seemed to think that there was shortcomings in terms of meeting the criteria of their.
Okay, well, I'll talk to the chair of FCM on that one as well, because she sits next to me at Metro. Okay. Seeing as she was the one who said we should apply for it. Okay,
We have a list of items for Public Works. Again, this is just for information purposes attached. We have the list, and I sat down with his staff, and they just basically kind of brainstormed on things they'd like to see. Obviously, the expectation isn't they wouldn't get all of that, but we wanted you to show this. Again, we'll bring additional information for this. This is just sort of a high level showing the types of things Public Works was interested in purchasing. And
Can I borrow that log splitter?
yeah, is that generally available, or?
revenue, we can rent it out.
Yeah,
I've got a manual one you can use.
I got a manual one too. It's got a nice wooden handle and a big heavy head.
The additional Public Works trucks, so we do have the Public Works staff in the budget. We weren't sure when I did the budget if we would need an additional truck, but the Public Works has discussed it and they do want an additional truck. So we lease our trucks. We have a 5-year lease. The existing lease, we're currently leased 3 trucks, so we'll be leasing 4. Expires June 30th, so we'll be doing an RFP soon for the new lease. I'm getting a more detailed quote from our current lessor, because obviously the cost of trucks have gone up a lot in the last 5 years, so the costs will be higher. But I've anticipated, I've just basically tried to predict what the higher costs would be, and they are in the current version of the budget for the 3. but this would be the additional annual lease payment for an additional truck, the $7,500. We need a new desktop computer for the office. Basically, we've got one that's on its last legs, and we have to replace the server this year for the office. And then I have some additional items which...
Can I have the old one? I'll buy it.
Well, we do have,
You have to clean it.
we have to
No, you take the discs out and smack them with a hammer. That's how you clean
look
it.
at our disposal of assets policy, or we can
You
write
talking
one.
about the log splitter?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't want it. So,
So then we've just listed some other items that we were thinking about, but obviously it's too early to even predict the amount. The Lions Bay Beach Park, we do have the $29,000 of the 2017 new budget. Once we rebudgeted the emergency consultant, and when we get their report in 2018, we know there's going to be EOC supplies that we need, laptop computers and things, in order to run an EOC. From that will also come a part-time emergency planning coordinator. We have the office renovations. We are actively getting quotes right now, so we'll have more information for that at the next meeting in the council chambers. And at the present time, I will reconfirm with the fire chief. He doesn't actually have any capital requests this year. And we were thinking, we know we're going to have to replace the fire truck, so I'd like to look at maybe budgeting for some money to start putting towards the fire truck.
yeah,
reserve.
that's a reserve I can get
Yeah.
behind.
So,
That's a
Yeah.
yeah,
money.
yeah.
Yeah, $1 million.
Exactly,
Right?
exactly.
I lost track over 10 years, but I wouldn't think we're quite at $1 million for what we need here.
I had an unofficial request today from somebody at Tracking Point that's Lions Bay fund fire truck for them.
Oh. Perhaps they think
I said-
that
I
we
said-
take care of
I
it.
said, bring it to council, but I suggest maybe you try something else first.
Have they seen our budget?
Yeah, no, I don't know.
Okay.
It's funny. It just came up out of the blue and I thought,
So
well, that's
this
interesting.
is just a start. I just, like I said, I've almost given it to council to take away and then build on it, and this will be we'll be focusing on these types of schedules at the next meeting.
Remind us what the surplus was in the bare bones budget, the operating budget?
130,
130.
no, was it?
That's a remarkably coincidentally similar number to the requirements here.
Yeah.
Is that just pure coincidence?
Well, actually, it's not
There's
because,
stuff that's not on here, for example, the Wi-Fi estimate for the Platt building. There's
Right
other
about that.
items that aren't.
It was 130.
So, and
That's a
this
TC.
doesn't take into account any council requests either, so.
but also,
Have
do you
there been
see
council
the
requests?
5 items that have TBD?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's no numbers. for
No,
this.
I'm looking at the 130,887.
Yeah.
There it is right there.
But we do know, so that was what I was going to conclude. You can see that even without the larger ticket items that don't have a value on them, we're already at what our surplus was. So again, supporting the fact that we probably shouldn't have a 0% tax increase. And we'll just have to look at different ways of funding some of these projects. I know we've talked about the Lions Bay Beach Park being funded by money we loan to ourselves when we sell the property and,
Yeah, that
So
can't
there's
actually be
a-
legitimately
yeah.
actually spent pending the guidelines or the
yeah, the things that can't be.
what do you call it? Not rules. What did you call it?
Statutory.
Test. The test.
Mhm.
So it'd be 2 components, money
Yeah.
that we can just draw from it and pay, and then other things we can borrow from that money
Yeah.
and loan to ourselves.
Yep.
So, very preliminary. And then the last page, this is additional revenue that I don't have in the budget yet. Again, it was more to be conservative. We do anticipate having temporary use permits this year. So the CIO and Peter and I went through and we decided we'll assume maybe we'll get 10 this year. That is probably being conservative. So that would generate $12,500 of
This is
revenue.
for STPs.
Yes,
STRs.
STRs.
What did I say?
STP?
What's an STP?
It's
Sugar
a
treatment
gas
plant?
additive, I think.
Oh yeah, that STR. Sorry.
And in this case, just to be conservative, I have, we do have money in for the building inspector, but I had budgeted additional time for him to cover some of the work that would be done with the temporary use permits. And then for subdivisions, we assumed 5. It's just to give council a sense of how much revenue it would generate. That would be $16,250 of revenue. So that would be an additional $28,000 of revenue.
Probably end up costing us quite a bit more than the 28,000, but it's the I'll call it the bait, but it's what we need to do to gain the benefits of
Right.
those those aspects.
But the planner time already is in the budget, because there will obviously be,
yeah.
this is one of the reasons we need the planner, so.
And that planner would physically sit here? They'll need a desk and a computer as well, presumably?
They'd probably share one with the, in the office that we would build here,
Yeah.
this would be the planner and the building inspector.
And did you budget their computer and stuff?
Building inspector uses his once or twice, 2 days a week, and this would be 3 days. So.
And we do have to be careful, depending on how we hire the person, I mean, consultant/employee, if it's a consultant, we will expect them to supply their own computer.
Yeah, right.
Because then you get into that gray area where they could be deemed an employee.
Okay, that's details. I'll let you worry about that part. When did that person start again? Because as you know,
That person starting April 1st.
today is not soon enough.
Again, that's just because even if we started looking today, I think
Yeah,
it would
yeah.
take us until April 1st. It would be a challenging position to fill.
Okay. Thanks. Even though this was on table, and obviously it's been hard for us to digest on the fly at
It's
all.
definitely meant as a takeaway.
Yeah, but just as without any obligation or even noting it at this stage, does anybody want to moot any council-originated expenditure, capex or otherwise? Ron, I know you would put your hand up for quite a bit more for the beach.
Somebody beaten up before we got to the crummy old beach park at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah.
So,
Fred,
no.
Jim, Norm?
No.
I mean, my only one would be a community signage budget. And given that signage is a lot cheaper than I thought it was, absent the installation cost, I mean, it's not really even worth, given these numbers here. I would ask what the heck spool gun was for $1,100 and say I could get quite a lot of road signs for $1,100, but
What?
spool gun.
Number 8.
Pool gun.
See,
It was probably unfair to put this in here. I
Yeah.
didn't want to have this lump sum of 58.
well, I mean, it's
Just,
realistic. Although why we need a $15,000 chainsaw, I don't know, but I'm sure we do.
1,500. 15,000?
1,500.
Just checking.
You'll see
Hell of a chainsaw.
supplemental, you'll see supplemental detail request forms.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah,
Although,
I think that has to do with welding, the welder that we have.
yes, yeah, it'll be a TIG welder.
This was sort of staff getting together and brainstorming, which I think is a good exercise to just list all the things they need with no expectation that we're going to get them all.
Yeah, I mean, if speaking for myself only, I don't really have a problem with any of these, other than to say it doesn't seem to take into account the fact the public works yard would be moving it
No.
in a conceivable time frame, 1, 2, 3 years. So some of this will be designed into a new building, but like a 10,000-pound truck lift.
Or the welding fume extractor, et cetera.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, I think in terms of guiding thinking, in terms of surplus and tax increase, this looks okay, right? The only thing that I have a concern about is the steps to the bus stop. Although, do we have to do that?
It's up to council.
No, we were asking a technical. Technically, we have to do it.
You'll see the supplemental request. If council chooses not to do it, there will be additional maintenance costs and inspection costs on a regular basis, but
You don't anticipate any capex requirements resulting from the bridge inspections at this stage.
too early to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The supplemental stuff the staff's bringing forward, is it gonna have their marker priority on it? Or importance?
Yep, we can do that.
The-
Yep,
the-
definitely.
I'd like to see the importance that you guys place
Yeah.
on it, in however you put it, if there's
Yeah.
30 requests and we tend to look at the first page and it's all got them all there, and we can
Mhm.
vary them wherever you want, but there you go. That would be good, thank you very much, and I know Pam is pushing very hard to have the budget through all discussion before the end of February.
Well, at council's request, you did want the
Yeah.
budget done
Mm-hmm.
earlier.
Yeah.
No, but I
As much for the reason that we can get going,
Yeah.
even though a lot of the expenditure that we're talking about planning, because stuff is in the 5-year plan, so we could in theory do that today, just so we know where we stand. What would it still be correct to say that a 1% tax increase will raise $11,000?
It's 14 now.
14 now.
Yeah, it's 14 now. And on that note about the February, that's actually just for the 2018 year of the 5-year plan. Generally, as a reminder to council, we sort of hammer out what we think 2018 is, and then again, to expedite anything that's not in the 5-year plan, last year council actually had a resolution to accept the 2018 year of the 5-year plan to enable staff to start on some of the projects. But then I have to do the 5-year plan, so I still anticipate that coming towards mid to end of March, because I do have to work on then the 5-year plan.
But you're going to do
the
that pre
2018
2019 resolution.
Yes, I mean, we did that last year, and I think it was successful, even though we still
Did we
had
take
some
advantage of it?
rebudgets. We did, not 100%, we still had some rebudgets, but.
Well,
I
we're
think
only 9
that-
days into the year,
Yeah,
right? So.
Yeah. But, and it was also anticipation of, other factors, but we, I think we're well on track for that. That's several meetings between now and the end of February, so. Like I
Well-
say, this was just to get you a sense of what we're looking for and to sort of put the 130 surplus in perspective.
Yeah. 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 How much are you thinking about for the fire truck reserve?
I was thinking of 20, but to tell you the truth, I just kind of, it was gonna be a number, I think, manipulated based
Mm.
on what other items came up.
What do fire trucks cost?
Minimum 500,
500.
and
Yeah.
somewhere between there and 750, depending on what you got on it.
Okay, well, so let's be conservative. 750, and we'll need it in 7.5 years' time. That's 100,000 a year.
I know we talked about perhaps community amenity contributions, other sources of funding. I mean,
Yeah,
there
when
used to
they
be
come,
sometimes
yeah.
grants, but I haven't seen grants for a long time for fire trucks.
And that's assuming you buy a new one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but just to be conservative, how much should we be putting away? This would be probably the one reserve that I could see current taxpayers paying for a future resident's benefit, because when we need the fire truck, we need it.
To keep it in perspective, though, we do need to use, and this is the depressing news, we'll get our asset management plan and we'll find that we have a lot of fire truck type items. And that then forms part of the future, 20-year plan in terms how do we cover off the infrastructure deficit we know we're going to have in terms of our reserves and the life expectancy of our assets.
Fire
Do-
trucks are a little bit different than everything else in the fact that they're, first of all, the premium emergency management tool, no matter how you look at it in a place like Lions Bay. Also, it's important to stretch it out as far as you can so that you can plan for the future. So if you know you're going to be expanding or doing whatever you're going to do, you're going to have to be really good at figuring out what your needs are 10 years from now, because if you don't, you can't budget for it, you can't plan for it.
Exactly.
So that gets to be a really tough one, I would think, from a fire department's point of view.
Does the asset management plan speak to the two alternatives of funding CapEx, which is borrow the money and let future taxpayers pay back the loan, or put
Mainly
reserves?
just identifies what the shortfall is, and then it becomes a political decision in terms of how you fund that.
But I would say there's certain asset classes that are definitely future use, and some that are underspent, like roads. And we should be putting money into a roads reserve because we've underspent on roads, and we're going to need Bayview, for example. Okay, well, I mean, that's something that we're going to have to address this year, right? When do we see the asset management plan, do you reckon?
It would definitely be here by the summer.
It's going to be interesting. Because, yeah. What does the infrastructure master plan say our infrastructure overhang is? 17 mil?
Yeah,
Something like that?
don't recall, but yeah, it's a big number.
I think the grand total is somewhere around 26, wasn't it?
I thought there was a 7 in it. It could be 27. It's a, to use a technical term, no, that would be a profanity. A shed load of of money. I caught myself in time. Ha! Decorum. Okay. So that concludes your budget presentation
It does.
for the general fund. Thank you. Anything else? So there is a recommendation for a motion to receive the report. Can I have that motion? I see a motion and a second. No second? No, thanks. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Pam. Okay. Anybody need a break? Who's head spinning? Nobody. Okay. Okay, so the next is another report from Pam this being Pam's evening, the BDO planning report.
Yes.
Any major surprises? Because we have seen several of these.
You have. It's, I don't want to say a formality because it's an important formality, but this is the audit plan that BDO is proposing, and they asked, and it's actually addressed to council. So in a
Yeah.
way, this is like correspondence. It's me bringing it to council.
Yep.
And it'll be minuted that you've actually seen it, and then the auditors check that as part of their audit.
Right. I'll just remind council that the audit report is addressed to council. It is our assurance that everything's on the up and up, and therefore it's us engaging these guys if we're satisfied with their performance to date, etc., etc. So, take any discussion if there is.
So essentially, it's a summary of how they're doing the audit, what their process is, last year's management letter, or what their materiality is. It's really just, like I said, a very detailed version of how they're going to audit your financial statements, because as Carl says, they're doing this for council, auditing the financial statements.
Yeah, this is where we sign on the dotted line
And
that the numbers are good.
And we had the interim audit, and it went well. That was done, I think, the second week in December. And the audit is scheduled for their usual time that they come in, which is the second week of April. So I think we've tentatively scheduled, because we have to book Bill Cox so far ahead, we've actually booked him for a CSC. I should have checked that date. I think it's early May. On a Tuesday, it would be a meeting where he would come in and present the financial statements. So we do have the option of, we've always had it in the afternoon at a CSC, and the idea is he present the financial statements, and then if council are comfortable with them, at that meeting or at the next meeting, we approve the financial statements, because that is a requirement to have the formal approval.
Are we trying to accelerate that process any, or are we still going to be going down to the wire to produce the annual report?
Well, this just forms a piece of the annual report. The annual report schedule can be completely independent of that, which we want it to be. We've actually talked about accelerating that schedule, starting the process earlier. This just becomes a piece that feeds into the annual report, and just by the nature of
But
the
that was
audit
always the
process-
last piece, was it not?
No, not generally. It does come in kind of at the last minute, but it doesn't delay the annual report. The annual report's due June 30th, so we actually have the financial statements approved and ready to go 6 weeks before.
Okay, so
Yeah,
the annual
report is
report
due.
we could
Yeah.
really accelerate. Not that anybody said, where's the annual report to me, anyway. You're getting very close to the deadline, you know. I guess I'm the only one who says that. Okay, so we've received this. The recommendation is to receive it. Do I have a motion? That's a motion, and a second. Any further discussion? All good?
What does this audit cost?
thought I saw it in
In
here.
total, it costs about $35,000.
Yeah, I thought-
Over
which
the
I think is
interim and
very
year end.
reasonable.
Okay, not 63 or 47.
No.
Oh,
I
no,
thought I saw
sorry.
37
What that
in
is
this.
that's the materiality limit. So basically, what that means is 63,000 is they don't audit down to the penny. So essentially, anything they find, $60,000 is what they judge to be, if there was a number on the financial statement misstated by $63,000, it would impact someone's decision-making on the financial statements, but anything less than that wouldn't. It's kind of a bit of an abstract number, but they do, all audits have a materiality, and the more revenue you have, then the higher the materiality is. So essentially, and so when they verify or audit the financial statements, they don't say they're accurate to the penny. I mean, there's always going to be accruals and things like that, and sometimes they find no errors, but they can potentially find up to $63,000 of errors that we choose not to adjust, which is a moot point because I always do adjust anything they find, but some municipalities don't. They could still give us what's called a clean audit opinion and say that these financial statements fairly represent the financial activities.
They're close enough.
So so basically that's what the materiality is.
Yeah, I mean, the audit fee is 1% of our budget. That's quite a lot of money to get $3 million audited, but that's just the reality of a small place. What did West Van's audit cost?
More. I can't remember what it was on the top of my head.
But I bet you it
You're
wasn't.
testing my memory.
I bet you it wasn't $3 million, given that that's the size of their budget compared to us.
It's one of the things we've talked about, that being a smaller municipality, there's certain costs, like
Yeah, fixed
it
cost.
takes them a week to audit us, and it essentially takes
Yeah.
a week to audit. fair enough, they have more staff auditing West Vancouver, but.
They've got an audit coordinator.
But on that note, sorry, I got distracted. In May, we're going to have the meeting, we could have it at the CSC. We do have the option of having Bill come in the evening. It's just that there's a real demand on his time, so I'd have to put that request in fairly quickly if you'd prefer to have it. I know sometimes the CSCs are difficult.
Well, I mean, quite frankly, his presence is a formality because unless there's a surprise, we'll hear about, which we will hear about a lot sooner than Bill's attendance at any meeting. Yeah, it's a formality. I don't think he needs to come in the evening, unless council particularly wants to see him in the evening rather than the afternoon.
But that's what I'm saying. Would you prefer to have it at the evening meeting or an afternoon meeting?
I mean, he will present the report and give us comfort that we can accept it, so it doesn't really matter. I have no preference. Anybody?
I have no preference, and I think that actually if there's work constraints for the afternoon, you don't have a shrunk council, that's fine.
Well, the big advantage, I think, is for Norm's benefit that Bill could answer any of his questions, and so it would just be dependent on your availability.
Yeah, it would be largely dependent on you. So can you make the 23rd of April?
I think it's May. I think it's the
Oh,
7th
yeah.
of May.
If it's that much
No,
notice, it's no problem.
Okay, right. I think we have more likelihood of getting them in the afternoon, and I like the process of it being in a CSC because.
Yeah, it's less formal.
And then the
yeah.
CSC recommends approval of the financial statements to council, and in that evening's meeting, we could approve the financial statements.
Did I call the question? No. So all in favour? And opposed, that carries. So that report's been received. Thank you. And next on the agenda, we find the cleaning contract, page 75. You've all seen it. The recommendation is to approve the contract service agreement with Nuthatch New Tech Facility Services Limited and authorize the mayor and the chief administrative officer to sign the contract. May I have a motion? A second? Any discussion? Anything we should be highly concerned about?
Well, can I ask a question on this?
Sure.
They were approving it for now, but they actually started in 2017, August, I believe it is. Why the delay?
Guess we were remiss at bringing it to council to get it signed. They were replacing previous cleaners we had that we had to let go for poor service.
But, so essentially they were working without a contract, and they were okay with that?
Mhm.
Okay.
Oh, that's their choice, I suppose. The beach washroom thing, though, are we going to engage them for that
We do
We have.
engage them, we have,
Yeah.
yeah.
on the weekends?
They come in when they do their cleaning, and this happens to be, they actually clean Sunday night. Our previous
Sunday night.
cleaners cleaned Monday night.
Well, Sunday night doesn't really help anybody going to the beach. So, yeah, it would have to be
Well-
Saturday night.
Cleans out
So
the
what we
worst,
do,
Cleans out the what?
after the worst total of, like,
Yeah, but
its uses.
so we
Yeah.
clean on Friday, we check and make sure it's ready for the weekend. And they come in after the weekend rush and they clean up the mess from the weekend rush.
Okay, so, but that's up to your committee, Ron. I mean,
Yeah.
it needs a Saturday clean, right? So how's that
You're-
going to happen? That's
I think
something
it
else.
needs
huh?
some more diligent.
Yeah.
You're saving costs because Public Works cleaning up after a weekend, it's huge cost.
Yeah, the differential is good. Yeah, that's true. Could they not come in on Friday as well?
I don't know, that would have
Yeah.
to be negotiated.
It's
with them.
challenging, we find with the cleaners, we've had actually issues with cleaners with their schedule. We can't actually pick the day, we're lucky to get the Sunday, actually.
Yeah,
I mean,
that sort of works
our
out.
previous cleaners were Monday nights, we had other ones that came in Wednesday during the day.
Well,
It's partly our location, they send the teams out.
Oh, they're bonded. And they get free run of the place, right?
Yeah.
But they are bonded.
worried about the toilet paper.
No, I mean,
They're in the office.
Yeah.
things.
Okay, anyhow, so I mean, for the $171 a month to clean the Lions Bay Beach.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm
I
just
mean,
thinking, can we spend more?
Oh, yeah, I mean, you get what you get here, so let's move on.
Okay, so there's a seconded motion on the table. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Was that, you had the further discussion?
I preempted you.
Oh, okay, so that was 4, and all those opposed? I see none, so that carries. And there's an ad on the agenda, the Clean Water Waste CWWF project tender timeline.
Before we get into this, I'm not sure how long we're gonna take, but we're 5 to 10.
Yeah, okay, so I'll take a motion. I actually read the council procedures bylaw and we can only extend for an hour. So I'll take
At
a
a
motion.
time.
At a time,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'll take a motion, please, to extend the time of this meeting by 1 hour until 5 to 11. And hope that we never need it. Thank you, and a second. And any discussion on that one? No, no quibbles? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. So we're clean. Ron? No,
Norm.
it's actually Norm's motion.
Yeah, no, I understand we've got an extension for the grant to March 2019. My fear is that there's a sense of relief about this and that the sense of urgency around getting the tender out has somehow muted. And I just want to express my concern about that because 2019, March 2019 is still going to be a very challenging date to meet.
Correct.
So I would push as hard as we can to get this tender out and get a contractor engaged by March 2018.
You missed the discussion where I expressed exactly the same sentiment last meeting, I think, or the meeting before.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think we're on it. The last time we got a very good, succinct summary from staff on the timeline, when the design was going to be finished, when the review was going to take place, and blah, 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 with tender issue date of December 19th, if I remember the date correctly.
Correct.
I think if we can see that.
We're waiting for that. So we had a site meeting. So we were on the previous timeline before we got the extension. We had a site meeting with all the proponents that were interested in bidding. During that site meeting, the pre-tender meeting, there were several questions raised by some of the proponents who were intending to bid. Those deficiencies need to be ironed out before we go and retender.
In the design.
In the design, in certain other issues such as, the best one to pick is a laydown area. So the question for the potential bidders is, where is the laydown area for these projects? And because we're so small and because our boulevards are used up, there's not really a laydown area for construction. So if we had gone to bid, those contractors would be ordering valves, chambers, prefab, pre-construct items for delivery the day that they plan to install it, and that leads to complications in timeline and scheduling, whatever. Whereas if they had a laydown area, they could order materials in advance, have it all delivered to the laydown area, and then use them as they required them. So those items are being discussed right now. The intent is once we have those ironed out, I'll come back to council with a firm schedule on when we're gonna tender, when it's gonna go out.
So the tender package is, what percentage do we need to, how much do we need to adjust to this tender package to make it?
It's 90% complete. We're just waiting for the final drawings for the PRV, and then the answer to some of these questions. Like, where are the offices for these construction people gonna be? Where is that construction compound gonna be?
Why are we answering these questions now? Because this was gonna be done, this was gonna be started last year.
Correct. We didn't have time to incorporate these questions into the original tender because we were tight timeline.
Because the period of the tender was, so you had these questions before, I think, you just hadn't needed to ask them.
They were questions that were gonna come up anyways, yeah. So,
And remind us,
I
we're
don't
not doing
think-
the, sorry, go
My
on.
concern is not to get hung up on those things, because we have to build it. We have no
Absolutely.
choice, so we have to make a
Yeah.
laydown area available.
yes,
This shouldn't take a lot of time.
Yeah, some of the complications involve exploring exactly where that's gonna be and whether it's in our boundary, our land, or outside our boundary in some Crown's land. So that's a complication that we're trying to deal with.
I would steer away from that then. And maybe we don't have a laydown area and they order material as needed.
that will significantly increase the cost of
And extend the timeline.
that proposal. So we have all those factors
But
into
you're on it.
account. Yeah, yeah.
You know.
So remind us, are we doing the bridge across Alberta Creek or not?
No.
So that's not in the design, not in the tender. But the other two supplemental projects?
I really doubt that we'll be able to do the Bayview water main upgrade, but we will be doing the PRV control valve and increasing the size of the RV tank.
But the Bayview water main upgrade has to be designed, right? So that it can be tendered.
It's, yeah.
Yeah.
The design portion is within the budget. within our operating, within.
But we've only got $2.71 million.
Mhm.
So when's the tender gonna go out again?
I don't know yet, we're still working
He
on those.
refuses to make a promise.
Once we get those answers
That's
done.
that's my concern, that's why
Absolutely,
yeah.
understood, yeah, yeah.
'Cause
I'm not going to even ask you for a tentative date, but
I won't be able to give you that,
Yeah.
yeah.
So a tender, intent to go out to tender in March, okay?
No, well before that.
Well before
Yeah.
that.
I was gonna say
All I'm
weeks,
saying-
not
All I'm
months.
saying, it translates to into February.
Even before that.
Yeah, no, I know,
hopefully.
but all I'm saying is that that's gotta be in place in order for that to happen. So all
Yeah.
I'm saying is that it's always, you look at the date and you say, okay, it's gonna be at least a month before that you actually have to have it in place.
Correct, we want the tender open for at least a month.
Yeah.
Council, you guys missed this, but the remaining council gave a tentative delivery date of end of September. So
Yeah.
That's fine.
essentially a 6-month extension for all kinds of good reasons we don't need to go into.
To de-risk this, is this not something we would wanna throw money at? To get this tender package ready? On time?
Honestly, those questions need to be answered. We need to find a layout area, we need to determine.
But that all takes time and energy, that all takes resources, right? Answering
And we're
those
working
questions.
on it, it's,
So all I'm
What he's
asking-
saying
so
is,
what I'm
should we
saying
get
is,
somebody to help?
Should we get someone to help and get some money out of the budget to do that?
I don't think internal staff are what's driving this, it's the consultant, the contractor that are looking into this.
We need a bigger
Ecom
stick
or-
budget.
AECom, yeah.
And we should hammer on those guys.
Yeah.
We are.
Oh,
I
he's
talked to them
advocating
once
a hammer, I'm advocating a stick. Well, let's get both, because they're not
I talk to
expensive.
them once a week and we're on, yeah,
They
Let's
charge
get
a
him an
lot of
extra
money.
phone budget
Yeah.
and call them daily.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm comfortable that you understand the
Urgency.
political
Yeah,
drivers as well as the project.
It's,
Yeah.
when bidding projects, it's the thing that brings the Ministry of Highways to their
Mhm.
knees, because they forget that piece of it, and something falls down, they go to bid, and all of a sudden, they've gotta move, because they got no lay down area, they got nothing to start, and it causes all sorts of
the
problems.
biggest driver right now is waiting for the final drawings for the PRV. Yeah, once those come in, we'll be ready to go. So I'm hoping we'll have tender, before the end of the.
Because the infrastructure committee has seen the 50% drawings on
Mhm.
the PRV.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's getting there.
No, this is the control valve on Mountain Drive, this is the additional. We had a cash, I forget what they call it, a cash amounting the tender to cover that, but we're now going for the design of that. So there's no ambiguity in the final bid price.
And you believe will come in at 2.7?
I don't even wanna hedge that, it depends on the market.
Well, I think council already gave you an indication that we'd be prepared to self-indemnify ourselves for any overspend when we said you could go to June rather than March 31 if we weren't going to get the extension.
Yeah.
There is a lot of work out
Oh,
there
yes,
right now.
it's a council resolution. So the point is, I think if it comes to it, we'd be prepared, because we already were prepared to spend money beyond the 2.71 funded loan.
Let me get you the schedule first.
So
We will.
AECom developed the tender package,
AECom developed the tender
Wasn't
package.
and they left out those logistics.
It's just not,
Those logistics were
not beneficial.
left out because
No, the point is,
we just didn't
we'll
have
spend
time,
extra money.
Norm. We got the grant approval, and we initiated AECom in the summer of 2017 and had them turn around from, I believe it was May or June, and create the entire package for tender by September, October. So we were running full tilt and didn't have time. So there's a lot of staff review time as well that's involved, so they provide the drawings, we have to review them, and that takes a long time as well, so
Who's our owner's rep?
I am,
Yeah.
yeah.
I just lean heavy on those guys. You pay
Absolutely.
them big bucks, just
Yeah.
Yeah.
don't let them off easy.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, you are a little too nice.
I will remind council that prior to coming here, I was in West Van and lots of tenders, lots of contracts, 15 million capital budget.
Well, you've certainly gotten the results so far, so I don't think we have any qualms.
I
Yeah,
am pushing them. hard.
as hard as needed, yeah.
Okay, all will accept Nye as a nice guy.
Nice Nye.
Okay, that's
Resolve.
a good
Okay.
message.
Norm,
That's good,
this will
yeah.
come up in a minutes, and we'll get it onto the front page for the
Yeah.
unfinished business.
Yeah, I think everybody's aware of that, most importantly Nye. So, does that satisfy you in terms of
Yeah,
staff
no,
report?
thanks, Dennis.
Okay, good,
No
thanks.
worries, no worries, absolutely. On them.
Okay, so we'll move on. There being no mayor's report or council reports, we'll move to committee report. And the only one on the agenda is the Lions Bay Beach Park Advisory Committee meeting minutes of November 23rd, 1789 page. Do you want to just quickly give us the clip notes on this one, Ron?
Well, let's go in the bigger picture. We'll pass that now. We've moved on. The survey's in hand. The next meeting will be next Thursday, and there'll be one meeting after that. I'm looking to close the committee to the recommendation to council. The survey provided more than enough information for decisions to be made. I think that's pretty much it for now. I think the next council meeting, council will see the last minutes, which will be more fulsome, and we're really down to the nits here for the recommendation. Okay.
Yeah, I think, sorry, the point is that there's been a meeting subsequent to this,
Yeah.
2 Thursdays ago. Any reason why we're not seeing those minutes? Not really yet.
Well, they'll be drafted best anyhow.
Oh, they haven't gone through the committee yet. Okay, good stuff. Okay, so a motion to receive this report, these minutes, and what do we do? We don't approve these or anything, we just say we've seen them, yeah.
Receive for
A
information.
receipt for information. So that's a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And no motion service report, so we'll move on to the next actual item on the agenda, which is correspondence. Ron, you want to do your inimitable here?
Do this in 1 minute or less. Canada's tax revenue. G1, we're being asked if we'd like the push is that we share in the revenue. I don't believe we have a Canada store here, so let's just say no response at this time. G2, who could forget the quagga and zebra mussels?
Well, I know that's a good, those are nice words, but do we have any issues with mussels in our fresh or saltwater anything, Nye, at this stage?
So the quick skinny is we addressed this last meeting
Yeah.
from Sycamoose, and so Pemberton has doubled down with essentially the same message.
Yeah.
And it's about beating on the province, so no response as I can tell. G3, the managing the wood smoke, you've already addressed that in your mayor's report, Mayor, and I'm sure you continue to do that.
We're going to put a piece in the utility bill, is that right? Yeah, a brochure?
No, not the utility bill and the
Tax bill?
Tax bill.
Okay.
And there we go. And so the last one is about the Housing First invitation, which is open to all elected officials. So gentlemen, you have till February the 7th, when the date is, to say yes, you'd like to go. No response.
No response to any of those? Okay, good. So motion to receive correspondence and a second on that one. Any further discussion? Everybody good? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. So now I will return to the agenda and ask for any public questions and comments.
No.
Actually, I just really want to say publicly that I really appreciate staff and all the work they do and the attitude in which they do it, and good job.
Thank you.
And that comes from an unbribed member of the public.
Technically,
Thank you, Denise. Here, here.
I believe income splitting would be allowed.
Not Denise, dear, actually. Who's Denise? Income splitting?
Well, of course, you know, it's Fred makes a bundle, and you know, it's.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Only on the tax.
So,
Yeah.
of course, you're doing a great job.
Okay, so with that, if I can survive, I will now ask for a motion to close the council meeting under 91A, C, E, F, I, and L. That's the motion, and a second, and all in favor of that, and opposed to closing the meeting? That carries. I know that you're going to go for one day, you're going to go for every reason. That will be a happy day for you.
We did that already.
Did we?
once,
Have
I
we
think.
had all of them?
No, I think we were missing one.
And we're now resuming the meeting, having extended it by an hour at 11:21, reporting out one item that the terms of reference for the Memorial Project Select Committee were approved by Council and will be duly published in the minutes of the open meeting, and that the following members of the committee were approved: Wendy Conway Mayer, Tony Cox, Peter Dorsman, Tony Greville, Arlene Holstrom, Trudy Luthi, Philip Marsh, Uta Phillips, Ruth Simons, with Fred Bain as chair and Mayor Burr as ex officio ad hoc member. I can never remember. Ex officio, thank you. With first meeting to take place on the 19th of January. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting and a second. All in favour, opposed, carried. Meeting adjourned 11:22.
You did yourself.